Yo guys, I hope you've all had a really good Christmas, and before the video starts I just wanted to announce that our Discord server is up now. If you would like to join the server, the link is in the description. Anyway, enjoy the video guys. Alright guys, so today we're going to be building a white aesthetic budget gaming PC in this nice white fish tank style case. Now normally I spend a bit too long going over the parts and why we chose them, so what we'll actually do is, as we're putting it together, I'll go over the parts we chose and kind of why, and all the prices as well. But without further ado, let's get on with the PC build. For the CPU we went with a Ryzen 5 2600X. We only paid £29 for this from AliExpress. Even though this is quite an old CPU, with its 6 cores and 12 threads is still a great option for budget builds. For RAM we went with this 16GB kit of Killsry DDR4. It's meant to be clocked at 3200 MHz, but the first two kits that I've tried out, the three I have, aren't stable at 3200 MHz, so I've had to run them at 2933 MHz. This is okay for older processors like the Ryzen 5 2600X, but if you plan to use this for a build with a Ryzen 5000 series, you may lose some performance by the slower RAM. I only paid £21 for this kit, but I do recommend that you pay a little bit extra for a good quality kit of RAM. For storage, we went with this 500GB NeTAC M.2 SSD. It is only Gen 3 with speeds up to 3500 MB, but I only paid £21.50 for this M.2 SSD. Now I will just leave a link to the thermal paste I used because I'm pretty impressed with it. I actually paid £8 for 50 grams of thermal paste. That's right, not an 8-gram tube or 5 gram, 50 grams. And it was two 25-gram tubes of thermal paste. And I've already repasted about 10 different computers and I'm nowhere near through the first one. So the thermal paste itself costs a few pence. This was the most effective way for me to be able to build a bunch of computers and even benchmark computers when I'm swapping out CPUs without spending a lot of money on expensive thermal paste like Arctic or Thermalright. But either way, for the CPU cooler, we went with this ID Cooling SE214XT. So I paid £16.14 for this cooler. Now if you have the option to buy a CPU with a stock cooler and save some money, that's great, but the stock coolers aren't really that good. Now for the extra £8 it cost me to buy this cooler instead of buying a stock one, it's 100% worth it because the temps on this PC were extremely good. But this is a good budget cooler. I don't know exactly what the price is for it now, but as mentioned, I didn't pay too much for this. So I nearly forgot to mention what case we went with and what motherboard. So for the case, we went with an Ions KZV. It is an ATX case. Now the only reason I got this was because I don't know about you guys, but anyone that flips PCs in the UK, there's just not many good budget options for micro ATX fish tank style cases. Now I've had some in the past, but the prices just seem to fluctuate so much on them. When it comes to these budget builds, I tried to spend under £50 for the case. Whether that's including fans or not, it doesn't matter too much, but I try and keep it under £50. So yeah, we are using a micro ATX board inside of an ATX case, but luckily this is only a mid-tower ATX case, so it doesn't look too out of place. So for the motherboard, it's an ASRock B450M Pro 4-CB. Now this is actually an OEM motherboard, and I realised this when I was trying to look on the ASRock site for the BIOS updates and realised that it wasn't working for my motherboard. I'm pretty sure that this motherboard is found in a lot of CyberPower PC pre-builds, because it seems that CyberPower is the only company that can provide you with the updates for the motherboard. But for the motherboard we paid £41.95, and for the case we paid £56.99. For the power supply, we're using this AEGO 500 watt unit that I bought from AliExpress. Now I did buy 3 of these and they were all under £20, around £18 to £19. Now they do have some really ugly cables and they're probably not the best. I tried doing some research on these power supplies and there wasn't much on the internet about them. So if you're looking to replicate this build, I would just recommend trying to find a 500 watt or 550 watt power supply second hand on eBay. Now for the graphics card, we went with a GTX 1060 6GB version. Now this is quite a nice model. It's a white model from Asus. Even though the GTX 1060 is quite old now, it's still a capable card for older games or esports titles. And we paid £67.39 from eBay, which was including delivery. Now normally I would try and spend anywhere between 50 to 60 for a graphics card, but I did need one for this build, so I did have to spend a little bit extra. You do tend to pay a little bit extra for white graphics cards anyway. Overall, I think the build turned out great and it looks really good as well. But let's see how well this old hardware actually can play games. Alright, so first we played Fortnite at 1080p on competitive settings, which is performance mode and pretty much all low settings. Now we averaged around 151 FPS. I actually do think the RAM had a negative impact on our FPS here, especially because we're in the OG mode, so our FPS should be higher than normal, and I've seen around 160 FPS with this processor even in a normal battle royale. So I feel like we were missing out on about 10 to 20% of performance just because we had our RAM clocked at a slower speed, but overall it was a pretty smooth and enjoyable experience. Next we played Black Ops 6 and we were playing this on, I believe, the basic preset with FSR 3.0 enabled, which does help on older PCs, and we were averaging around 90 FPS. I do think if you customize your settings and rather than using a basic preset, you could probably achieve slightly more FPS, as there's many settings that are just absolutely pointless and don't really improve visual clarity and just tank your performance. But it's good to see that on an under £300 PC, Black Ops 6 runs quite well.
Enemy is down.
We also played GTA 5 and I believe we played this on medium settings just to try boost the FPS up a little bit. We also played this at 1080p like we do all our games. Now overall we averaged around 90 to 95 FPS. Inside of the city, when it gets a bit manic, it did drop a little bit, but as we went into the countryside later on as well, that did bring the FPS up. But overall, GTA 5 is an old game, but it still ran really well on this PC. Overall, I think this PC performed quite well. Now unfortunately we wasn't able to get the parts as cheap as we normally would. This was a build I was aiming to build for around £250, but the total, including everything with the cable extensions, the RGB controller, it all came out to about £282. Now for that price, if you're building it for yourself, it's not too bad, and you're on the AM4 platform, so you have an upgrade path anyway. But if we compare it to some of my other builds for around the £300 mark, this wasn't the best price to performance, but overall it's a great looking build and I had a lot of fun building it. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video and I'll see you all soon.